Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome to the stage CEO, Vista Equity Partners, Robert Smith, and the Chair of Olayan Group, Lubna Olayan.
Where do you want? I'm there.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Maybe. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. You can see. Okay, let's start. I'm really excited to be sitting next to Robert Smith here, founder, chairman, and CEO of Vista Equity Partners. Welcome to your third FII, I understand.
Thank you, Lubna.
And our fifth FII.
Yes, wonderful.
Really. Robert needs no introduction, but I had the privilege of spending an hour or so behind there, and we had a conversation. And I want to say, for those who were lucky enough to invest in Vista Partners, which you co-founded, CEO and chair for the last 21 years, you must have had a fantastic return. I was overwhelmed. I heard 39% IRR,
Right.
and I heard less than 1% loss ratio.
Correct.
Okay. And amazingly, Vista Partners has 75 companies in 170 countries, 75 countries with 80,000 employees. I'm sure we're going to get to talk about that later. Sure. Robert is known for his work to transform the human enterprise. Through his investment platform, as well as his personal dedication to expanding access to education and establishing on-ramps to opportunity. He is empowering others to participate in the global economy. Throughout the pandemic, he has been campaigning to bridge the digital divide in the US, strengthening the digital infrastructure, I understand, of minority-owned banks and lending institutions.
Right.
And you provided broadband access to underserved communities. Robert is, amongst many others, he is chair of Carnegie Hall and chair of Robert Kennedy Roundtable. He is also a fellow Cornellian.
Yeah,
So, named by Forbes one of the 100 greatest living minds, business minds, I'm really thrilled to be with you on stage. So let's get started.
great. Thank you, and thank you all for welcoming me and my team back to Riyadh.
Yeah, and we want to hear about all your plans that you have for the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so why don't we, well, you are known for your philanthropic activities and your passion for humanity, which is actually quite appropriate with the FII themes.
Great.
I want to tell you a story. I'm not sure many of the audience would know about it. During 2019, at a graduating ceremony in Morehouse, Robert announced to the 400 graduating students that he is ready to take over and pay off all their student loans.
Correct.
That is truly a generous
Oh, thank
gesture.
you. Thank you.
I will needle Robert and say I wish it was a co-ed school, though. But we'll get to talk about
Right.
that later. So going back to enterprise software, what potential do you see for it? How can it contribute to human progress?
Right. It's massive, and it is wonderful to be in a place where there's a recognition for the power of technology and how technology is actually transforming all communities and societies and companies. You know, from our perspective, and we always talk about technology, and many people think about this word digitization. Digitization is just software. Okay, at the end of the day, what we've all seen and experienced is a massive expansion in the computing power and capability and the connectivity to it. Well, none of that silicon actually works without software. And so part of what we have to do when you think about investing in humanity is to think about how we invest in our people to be effective in this new digital economy and ensure that all people have that ability, that access, that opportunity to now participate in that economy, which is the new economy, which will likely last for not decades, for potentially centuries as software continues to develop.
Very good. I love your quote. Do you want to, we talked about it,
Right.
The power of computing. Can you tell us the potential of it?
Sure. I mean, the thing that I understand and spend time with is, software in particular is the most productive tool introduced in our business economy of the last 50 years. It is an enablement platform. In my day, growing up at Cornell as a chemical engineers were the alchemists of that time. You all know that. We were able to transform oil into plastic, sand into silicon. It's chemical engineers that did that. But it is now the software engineers that are actually taking ideas, intentions, and transforming them into businesses and constructs and productivity and a better life condition for people on this planet. There's a new form of alchemist. And part of what every country, every company has to do is think about developing their people so that they can participate and be those alchemists, to be the producers of software, not just the consumers of software. Its productivity is massive, expansion is unparalleled, and its reach right now is unconstrained because we now have private and public cloud and connectivity everywhere. So part of what our obligation is, and our responsibility, is to enable all citizens in the communities that we live in that opportunity to participate in this new economy.
Great. So let's move to Saudi Arabia. As you know, in Saudi Arabia, we are undergoing Vision 2030. Technology is a great part of it. And we actually have become quite a tech-savvy country. Last year, Saudi Arabia hosted G20, B20,
Right.
all virtually. So, and we have a youthful population. I would say 60% or 65% of our population are under the age of 30. So if you were to advise policymakers here in Saudi Arabia on how further to enhance our tech ecosystem, what would be your key points to Saudi Arabia?
The key, in my mind, is, the greatest asset that Saudi Arabia has are its people. And it's important to think about how you invest in your people so that they can be enabled to participate in this economy. All of the silicon, all of the technology doesn't work without people. The way we think about our world at Vista, there's about 7.5 billion people on the planet. There's only 29 million of us who actually write code. There are fewer than 150,000 in Saudi Arabia. And so the policymakers, I would encourage them to invest in the infrastructure to develop software development ecosystems so that these people can now participate as producers. Now it's like building this beautiful building that we're in. You can spend a lot of time building it and designing it, but unless you actually put infrastructure in to maintain and enhance and support it for decades to come, it will peak once and then it will fade. So it's critically important to think longer term about building those ecosystems that give all of your citizens the ability to participate, if they want to, in the opportunity that is a digital economy.
No, it's very important, investing in our youth. So for you as Vista, where would you see the potential of investing in Saudi Arabia? And what can you contribute
For
to
us,
the vision?
For the last 20 years or so, we have had to fuel our own talent. We buy companies, we make investments in companies, and part of what we have to do is actually develop that talent. And we like to say, typically when we're buying a company, the executive, the founder, because it's a young industry, so the vast majority of the companies in enterprise software are still run by their founders. But what we found is they're actually running the biggest company they've ever run that day. So they don't necessarily have all the tools and experience and capabilities to continue to grow those businesses at scale and provide reliable products and services to their customer base. So what we do is actually enable them to find people, develop people from interns to entry level to boot camps to our training for high potential leadership profile people to the C-suites, to the CEOs, to their board dynamic. And we work with that management team to expand their understanding, their opportunity, because we've done now over 550 transactions in this space. We're saying, listen, many of the things that you're facing as a $100 million company growing at 100% are going to be different issues that you're facing when you're a $200 million company growing at 40% and you want to inflect your growth back to 100%. We bring those tools and those capabilities and infrastructure through what we call our value creation unit, our One Vista approach, to enable these businesses to be successful. That's why the loss ratio is the way it is because we're able to enable these companies to be very successful in the theaters in which they operate.
I think this is a great point. I think one of the biggest challenge for us as CEOs and leaders is how do we retain our people? And I think this career path and this investment in training that you have
Exactly. It's a great point. And part of it is if you're not intentional about it, then you're hoping you can find the talent. The scarcity of talent in this marketplace, it's real, it's global. You heard Prime Minister Mitsotakis talk about it. Well, they're now trying to welcome people back into Greece who have technical backgrounds and training. But if you don't build an ecosystem where you have companies where these college-educated, trained people can go and work and then innovate and become entrepreneurs that serve that ecosystem, again, it won't be as long-lived as creating a very robust ecosystem. So part of the early question of policymakers, think about it long-term. And I applaud Vision 2030 and what His Royal Highness has articulated. Now it's up to think about what are the infrastructures so you can support it for decades beyond 2030 and not looking at that as a goal, but actually a way station to now enable your young people. 65% are young people under the age of 25. That is a massive resource. And creating the infrastructure to welcome businesses, to welcome people to actually support the development of that enterprise.
Sustainability is another subject that is close to many people's heart, and especially our children and the youth. And we're a strong believer in that as well. So you said that you seek to ensure that your portfolio companies are all carbon neutral.
Right.
And how does ESG gets factored into your portfolio? But as well, if you see an investment that somehow is no longer an ESG compliant, do you unload it or do you try to transform it?
We fix it. Part of what we do is enable our companies to reach their absolute best potential. And it's, again, when you have an ecosystem of 70 plus companies, you have the ability to take information from one company and in essence, spread it to 20 or 30 more where it's applicable and where it actually can change the dimension. So what we've done, we've developed our own internal tools for measuring the carbon footprints, the greenhouse gas emissions from each of our portfolio companies. We've created a commission, a Sustainability Leadership Council. Over 150 executives across our 70 companies have volunteered to participate in this, measure the footprint, and now we look at offset capacity. And one of the offset capacities we use, and this is one of those double bottom line opportunities at Vista, is we've invested now with a group that's called ClearLoop. We actually build and fund the solar panels for African American neighborhoods. This first one is actually in Jackson, Tennessee. So part of what we're doing is saying, let's also provide another benefit to communities that don't necessarily have access to clean energy, and let's build that out as our offset to any sort of the greenhouse gas emissions in our infrastructure. We've been one of the first private equity firms to sign the Net Zero Initiative.
Yep.
Now there's ambitious goals, and we are looking to beat and exceed those goals. I was very impressed with what Aramco had come out with a couple of days ago and saying, listen, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And we're saying, listen, based on how I've seen that company move, would not be surprised to see them actually exceed those goals as well. That's what our intentions are, and we're driving, and we have systems, processes, and procedures to make that all happen.
Great. Valuations. SaaS companies are selling now at 25 to 50 times sales. Robert, are you worried about keeping up this beautiful IRR that you have accomplished in the last 21%?
Right.
Tell me, is that a concern for you?
The good news about enterprise software is it is one of the fastest growing markets on the planet. And it's because we've proliferated in all this computing power and connectivity, massive numbers of companies are actually growing at rapid rates. In our flagship fund, for instance, we have $150 billion of equity pipeline that we view as prospect A or prospect B. And for the most part, we continue to underwrite the 3 times cash on cash returns. We only invest in companies that we can underwrite to critical factors for success being under our control. We look at the revenue multiples, we look at their growth rates, we evaluate it, and believe it or not, our multiple purchases have been about the same for the last 5 years, even though for many of our competitors, I've seen it go up. For us, we evaluate what sort of technology is there, what sort of technical debt. This is what it takes to actually ensure that code is compliant and you don't have problems migrating it to cloud or actually meeting various compliance mechanisms for your customers. And we invest in an infrastructure to ensure that we can transform that business. Not just transform it from a productivity perspective, now from a diversity perspective, and from a sustainability in terms of greenhouse gases. So that's how we look at it holistically.
Oh, very good. So you don't feel under pressure to invest all this money very quickly. You're taking your time.
Absolutely. And we still have a 5% selectivity rate, so we're still very selective at what we look at and do.
Okay. No, so everyone, we should stay with Vista. Now, quick question. Greatest impacts on economies and societies, AI or blockchain, and why?
I think today it is AI. Ultimately, it will be a combination, but blockchain will actually reform the constructs of various industries. And that fabric will construct, here is going to be the oil industry, the upstream, downstream, oil and gas, shipping, whatever it is. Once that fabric is in place, I think you'll see a reorganization of that industry. And then that industry will probably stay static in terms of its participants. That's why I think longer term it's going to have a much bigger effect than AI short term.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Philanthropy is very important to you. How do you decide what to support for the greatest impact?
I look at it as, how do I enable the human spirit? I think it comes down to that. Lubna, it is a wonderful thing for you and I to be on this stage. And I don't know, many don't know in terms of how I grew up. In my background as an African American in a country that didn't necessarily provide the same opportunities for African Americans. I see similar things in terms of women in this country. And I see you, a CEO, you run the best run bank in the world, okay? And that's an important thing. And so when our students, when our people, when women, young girls see you, they say, I can be Lubna, okay? When African Americans see me in America, they say, well, I can be Robert. And we show them through our work and through our deeds. So part of our philanthropy has to enable that at scale. So it's not just 1 and 1, it's 100, it's 1,000, it's 10,000. Because when you enable the citizenry to now, become their best selves in that construct, it aids the company or the country they work for, the government they work for, and the country that they are a part of. And I think that's a big part of what our responsibility is, and that's how I think about it in terms of where I put my philanthropic time and dollars.
So you use the platform, the chances you have to really seek the impact that you desire. No, well done.
That's our role.
Yeah. Now, shall we touch about women here and what you're trying to do here in the country a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you know that in Saudi Arabia, which is different than other countries, women are quite interested in computing. Actually, at KAUST, half of the Saudi students in computer science and engineering are women.
Right.
So it's a very high ratio compared to other countries. In here, to go back to Saudi Arabia, how do you think we should harness the potential for women and also make sure they don't give up?
Right. I think it's a great point. When I looked at what the kingdom has accomplished, I think they've exceeded the goals they originally set out in terms of getting women into the workplace. I think they were saying 30%. I think they exceeded that by a decade, which is fantastic. The thing that's important is to also create businesses and infrastructure that they can now say, I can go work in that company, in that job, and also innovate and become entrepreneurs in technology. And that's software at the end of the day. So part of what our ambition and our goal here is with a number of ministers and His Excellency Ramayan saying, listen, how do we now bring some of our capacity as a private equity firm focused on software to build infrastructure, these, we call them centers of excellence, we'll call them here software development ecosystems, so that all people in the country can now participate in this opportunity.
Robert, thank you very much. And we really appreciate all the good work you do.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything you're doing here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. So good to see you. Thank you.